A disabled alien princess accidentally entered my room. No one wanted to marry her, except me. Dr. Marcus Chen rubbed his tired eyes as he walked down the long hallway of Harmony Station. His white lab coat was wrinkled and stained with various chemicals from his 16-hour workday. The space station was quiet now. Most people were sleeping. But Marcus had been working late again in the xenobiology lab. He reached his small room and pressed his hand on the scanner. The door made a soft beep and slid open. Marcus stepped inside, already thinking about taking a hot shower and getting some much-needed sleep. But he stopped walking immediately. There was someone in his room, eh? Figure lay collapsed on the floor near his bed. In the dim light, Marcus could see it was definitely not human. The person had pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly in the darkness. Long silver hair spread across the floor like liquid metal. Marcus's first thought was to call security. But then he heard a small, pained sound from the figure. His doctor training kicked in. Someone was hurt and needed help. He quickly turned on the lights and knelt down beside the stranger. It was a young woman, though clearly not human. Her skin was a beautiful light blue color, and her hair was actually silver. She wore elegant clothes that looked expensive and important. But what caught Marcus's attention was the strange device attached to her legs. The device looked like it was made to help her walk. But it was broken. Small sparks came from damaged parts, and one section was completely bent out of shape. The woman's breathing was quick and shallow. She was in pain. "Hey," Marcus said softly. "Can you hear me?" The woman's eyes opened slowly. They were large and purple, unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. When she saw him, fear filled her eyes, and she tried to move away. Wait, Marcus said, holding up his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm a doctor. I want to help." The woman said something in a language Marcus didn't understand. Her voice was musical, but filled with worry. She pointed at the broken device on her legs and shook her head sadly. Marcus looked closer at the device. It was clearly some kind of mobility aid, much more advanced than anything humans had made. But the damage was bad, without it working properly. She couldn't move around easily. "Let me help you," Marcus said slowly, hoping she might understand some English. Many aliens on the station knew at least basic human language. The woman watched him carefully as he moved closer. She seemed surprised that he wasn't afraid of her or trying to call for help. Most humans on the station were nervous around aliens. They didn't know Marcus gently examined the broken device without touching her. He could see where the main power source had been damaged. Some of the support structures were bent, and several connection points were broken. "I think I can fix this," he said, looking into her purple eyes. "But I need to get some tools for my lab." The woman tilted her head, not understanding his words, but seeming to understand his meaning. She pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Zareth. "Zareth?" Marcus repeated. "Is that your name?" She nodded and pointed at him. With a questioning look, "Marcus," he said, pointing to himself. "My name is Marcus." A small smile appeared on Zareth's face. It was the first time she had smiled since entering his room. Marcus stood up and went to his small closet. He pulled out a blanket and a pillow. He brought them back to Zaroth and helped make her more comfortable on the floor. "I'll be right back," he said, making hand gestures to show he would return. "Don't worry." Marcus quickly walked back to his lab. His mind was racing with questions. Who was this woman? How did she get into his room? Why was she alone and hurt? He gathered tools and supplies that might help repair her mobility device. Marcus had always been good at fixing things. During his childhood on Earth, he had spent hours taking apart old machines and putting them back together. When he returned to his room, Zareth was sitting up against his bed. She looked exhausted but alert. She watched him carefully as he sat down beside her broken device. "Let's see what we can do," Marcus said softly. He began working on the device, carefully removing damaged parts and examining the power source. Zaroth watched everything he did with great interest. Sometimes she would point to different parts and say words in her language, as if trying to explain how things worked. Marcus noticed that the design was incredibly advanced, but some of the engineering choices seemed inefficient. Humans had learned to build things differently, focusing on simple solutions that worked well. After an hour of careful work, Kea had replaced several broken connections and straightened out the bent support pieces. The power source was more difficult to fix, but he managed to create a temporary solution using parts from his own equipment. "Try it now," he said, stepping back. Zareth looked nervous but hopeful. She activated the device using a small control panel on her arm. The device hummed to life, glowing with soft blue light. Slowly, carefully, Zareth stood up. The device supported her weight and helped her move naturally. She took a few steps around the room, and her smile grew bigger with each step. She turned to Marcus and said something in her language that sounded like gratitude. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and gently touched his hand. Her skin was warm despite its blue color. Marcus felt a strange connection in that moment, as if they understood each other without words. But then Zareth's expression changed to worry. She pointed toward the door and said something urgent. She seemed to be explaining that she needed to hide or that someone was looking for her. Marcus understood. Whatever had happened to her, she wasn't safe. She needed protection, and somehow, she had ended up in his room. "You can stay here," Marcus said, gesturing around the room. "No one will find you." Zareth looked surprised again. She seemed to be asking why he would help her when he didn't even know who she was, Marcus thought. About how to explain. He pointed to her, then to himself, and made a gesture that meant same or equal. "Everyone deserves help," he said simply. For the first time since he had found her, Zareth looked truly at peace. She nodded slowly and said something that Marcus was sure meant, "Thank you." As Marcus prepared a place for her to sleep safely, in his room he realized his life had just changed completely. He didn't know who this mysterious woman was, or what danger she was running from. But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt her. 3 days had passed since Marcus found Zareth in his room. During this time, his life had become completely different, but in the best possible way. Every morning, Marcus would wake up and see Zareth sitting by his small window, looking out at the stars. She seemed to find peace in watching the distant suns and planets. Her mobility device worked much better now, thanks to Marcus's repairs, but he had been thinking of ways to improve it even more. "Good morning," Marcus said as he got ready for work. "Good morning, Marcus," Zareth replied in careful English. Her voice still had a musical quality, but now he could understand her words. Over the past 3 days, they had been teaching each other their languages. Marcus was learning Velthari, which was Zareth's native tongue. The language was beautiful but complicated. Zareth was much better at learning English, picking up new words quickly. "I have an idea for your device," Marcus said, pointing to her mobility aid. "Can I work on it tonight?" Zareth nodded with excitement. She had been amazed by how Marcus approached problems. Where her people built things in complex ways, Marcus found simple solutions that worked just as well, sometimes better. "My people, they make things. ... How do you say?" "Too much complicated," Zareth said, still learning the right words. "Your way is better. More ... efficient." Marcus smiled. He loved hearing her thoughts about human engineering. "Different doesn't mean wrong," he said. "Your people's technology is incredible. I'm just adding some human ideas to it." That evening, after Marcus returned from his lab work, they sat together on the floor while he worked on her device. Zareth watched carefully and sometimes helped by holding tools or explaining how certain parts were supposed to function. Marcus Zareth said quietly, "I must tell you something important." Marcus looked up from his work. Her tone was serious. "I am not just regular person," she continued slowly. "I am Princess Zareth of the Velthari Empire." Marcus's hand stopped moving. He stared at her in surprise. "You're a princess," Zareth nodded sadly. "That is why I was running. That is why I hide." "What happened?" Marcus asked gently. Zareth took a deep breath. "My father, the Emperor, he wants me to marry. It would make alliance with another world, to protect our people from enemy empire. But ... she gestured to her legs and the mobility device. "No one wants to marry someone like me. They see this and think I am weak. Broken." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. "That's ridiculous. You're one of the smartest people I've ever met." "You think so?" Zareth asked, looking surprised. I know so. The way you understand technology, the way you think about problems. You're brilliant. Zareth smiled, but it was still sad. I designed defense systems for my homeworld. I helped create shields that protect our cities. But because I need this device to walk, they only see weakness. Their loss, Marcus said firmly. Anyone who can't see how amazing you are doesn't deserve you. For the next hour, Zareth told Marcus about her world and her people. She explained that the Velfari Empire was facing threats from an expanding hostile empire called the Kethmori. The marriage alliance was supposed to bring military support to help defend Velfari space. But I ran away before the final marriage ceremony, Zareth said. I could not face another day of being rejected. How many suitors were there? Marcus asked. 47, Zareth said quietly. From 12 different worlds. All of them said no when they met me. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. How could 47 people be so foolish? Meanwhile, throughout the station, security forces had been searching everywhere for the missing princess. Marcus had heard announcements about a VIP guest who had gone missing, but he never connected it to Zareth. On the third evening, as Marcus was making dinner for both of them, his door chimed. Someone was outside. Zareth, hide, Marcus whispered urgently. She quickly moved to his small bathroom and closed the door. Marcus activated the device's silent mode, so it wouldn't make any noise. Marcus opened his door to find 2 security officers standing outside. Dr. Chen, one officer said.
Oh!
We're conducting room-by-room searches for a missing person. May we come in? Of course, Marcus said, trying to sound normal. What kind of missing person? A VIP guest from the diplomatic section, the second officer explained as they entered his room. Alien female, distinctive appearance. Have you seen anyone unusual? Marcus shook his head. I've been working in the lab most of the time. Haven't seen much of anyone. The officers looked around his small room quickly. They checked his closet and under his bed, but didn't think to check the bathroom thoroughly. If you see anything suspicious, contact security immediately, the first officer said. There's a significant reward for information leading to her safe return. After the officers left, Marcus felt his heart pounding. Zareth came out of the bathroom looking worried. They're looking for me, she said. Soon they will find me. What happens if they do? Marcus asked. I will be forced to marry someone who does not want me, Zareth said. And my people will have their alliance, but I will be unhappy for the rest of my life. Marcus thought about this for a long moment. What if there was another option? What do you mean? What if someone else wanted to marry you? Someone who actually cares about you? Zareth looked confused. Who would want that? Marcus took a deep breath. Me. Zareth stared at him in shock. Marcus, you cannot be serious. You are human. Your people are not part of the diplomatic summit. You have no political value for. My father, maybe not, Marcus said. I have something those other suitors don't. What is that? I see you for who you really are. I think you're perfect. Before Zareth could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Marcus's communication device beeped with an emergency message. A personnel report. 2 stations. Security alert in progress. Princess Zareth of the Velfari Empire has been located. Marcus and Zareth looked at each other with panic. They know where I am, Zareth said. Then we need to go. Now. Marcus grabbed his emergency kit and helped Zareth to her feet. Do you trust me? Yes, she said without hesitation. Good, because we're going to take a trip through the maintenance tunnels. Marcus led her to a hidden panel in his wall that opened to reveal the station's service corridors. These tunnels were used by engineers to access different parts of the station without using the main hallways. Stay close, Marcus said as they entered the narrow tunnel. Stay quiet. As they crawled through the maintenance shafts, Marcus realized that his simple life as a research doctor was over. But looking at Zareth's determined face in the dim light, he knew he had made the right choice. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to let anyone force her into a marriage she didn't want, not if he could help it. Marcus and Zareth crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnels for what felt like hours. The metal passages were hot and uncomfortable, but they were hidden from the security teams searching the station. Where are we going? Zareth whispered. As they moved through the dark tunnel to the docking bay, Marcus replied quietly, "We can hide there until things calm down." But as they reached the end of the tunnel, Marcus heard voices outside. He carefully opened the maintenance panel and looked out. Security officers were everywhere, checking every possible hiding place. "They're here too," Marcus said with disappointment. Suddenly, bright lights flooded the tunnel behind them. "This is station security. Come out with your hands visible." Marcus and Zareth had no choice. They crawled out of the tunnel and found themselves surrounded by at least 20 security officers, all pointing weapons at them. "Dr. Marcus Chen," the security chief said, "you are under arrest for helping a fugitive and interfering with diplomatic proceedings." "She's not a fugitive," Marcus said, standing protectively in front of Zareth. "She's a person who has the right to choose her own life." Two tall aliens in fancy clothes pushed through the crowd of security officers. Marcus recognized them as Velthari from their blue skin and silver hair. Though they looked older and more serious than Zareth, Princess Zareth, one of them said in heavily accented English, "Your father, the Emperor, is very worried. The diplomatic summit cannot continue without you." "I will not marry someone who sees me as broken," Zareth said firmly, standing up straighter despite her fear. "The alliance is more important than personal feelings," the second alien said. "Our people need protection from the Kethmori Empire. Without this marriage, millions could die." Marcus felt angry hearing them talk about Zareth like she was just a tool for making deals. What if there was another option for the alliance? The Velthari officials looked at Marcus like he was crazy. "You were just a human researcher. You have nothing to offer in terms of military support or political value." "Maybe not military support," Marcus said. "But I have something else to offer." Before anyone could stop him, Marcus stepped forward and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I formally request permission to court Princess Zareth according to human customs and traditions." The silence that followed was complete. Security officers stared at Marcus in shock. The Velthari officials looked like they couldn't believe what they had heard. "Cannot be serious," one official said. "Humans are a minor species. Your planet has no military power, no advanced technology to offer, no political importance." "That's where you're wrong," Marcus said, with confidence he didn't feel. "Humanity has something very valuable that you need." Within an hour, Marcus and Zareth found themselves in the main diplomatic assembly hall. It was a huge room filled with representatives from dozens of different alien species. At the center sat Emperor Kethver, Zareth's father, on a magnificent floating throne. The Emperor was impressive and intimidating. His blue skin was darker than Zareth's, and his silver hair was long and decorated with symbols of his rank. His purple eyes were sharp and intelligent as he studied Marcus. "So," Emperor Kethver said in perfect English, "this is the human who thinks he can marry my daughter." "Yes, Your Majesty," Marcus said, trying not to show how nervous he was. "I believe I can offer something valuable to the Velthari Empire." "Explain." Marcus had been thinking about this moment during their walk to the assembly hall. He knew he had only one chance to make his case. "Your Majesty, your daughter is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. She's a brilliant engineer and strategist. But the other suitors rejected her because they couldn't see past her mobility device." "This is correct," the Emperor said sadly. "They see weakness where there is strength." "Exactly," Marcus said. "But humans have learned something important. We've learned that differences don't make people weak, they make them stronger. We've developed technology and social systems that help everyone contribute their best abilities." Marcus gestured to Zareth. "In just 3 days, I was able to improve her mobility device using human engineering principles. Imagine what we could do for your entire empire." The Emperor leaned forward with interest. "Continue." "Humans specialize in adaptive technology and inclusive design," Marcus explained. "We could help you create systems that allow all your people to contribute regardless of their physical abilities. Your empire would become stronger, not weaker." "These are interesting ideas," Emperor Kethver said, "but they do not solve our immediate problem. The Kethmori Empire is expanding toward our space. We need military allies, not social improvements." At that moment, alarms began sounding throughout the station. A communication officer rushed into the assembly hall. "Your Majesty," the officer said urgently, "3 Kethmori ships have just arrived. They're requesting immediate audience with the diplomatic assembly." Fear filled the room. Many representatives began talking nervously among themselves. The Kethmori were supposed to be the enemy that everyone was trying to defend against. Should we prepare our defenses? A military advisor asked. "No," Marcus said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. "What did you say, Emperor?" Kethfer asked. "Don't prepare defenses," Marcus repeated. "Let them come to the assembly. I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Explain quickly," the Emperor demanded. Marcus thought about everything Zareth had told him about the Kethmori. "Your Majesty, has anyone actually tried to communicate? Directly with the Kethmori? Or have all your interactions been through military encounters? They attack our border stations," the Emperor said. "What is there to communicate about?" "Maybe they're not attacking," Marcus suggested. "Maybe they're trying to communicate, but your species have completely different ways of doing it." The Emperor stared at Marcus for a long moment. "That is, an interesting theory. Humans are good at finding ways to communicate with different species," Marcus continued. "We approach first contact situations differently than most civilizations. We assume misunderstanding before we assume hostility. And you think you can communicate with the Kethmori?" Marcus looked at Zareth, who nodded encouragingly. "I think Princess Zareth and I can work together to find out." Her mobility device, with human modifications, might be able to serve as a communication bridge. Emperor Kethfer was quiet for several minutes, thinking carefully. The entire assembly waited for his decision. Finally, he spoke. "Very well. You will have the chance to prove your theory. If you can establish peaceful communication with the Kethmori, I will seriously consider your proposal to court my daughter." "And if we can't?" Marcus asked. "Then you will be arrested for interfering with diplomatic proceedings, and my daughter will marry one of the other suitors." Marcus felt his heart pounding, but he nodded. "I accept those terms." As the Kethmori ships approached the station, Marcus realized that everything depended on the next few hours. Not just his future with Zareth, but possibly the peace between entire civilizations. "Are you ready?" Zareth asked quietly. Marcus took her hand. "With you, I'm ready for anything." The future of 3 empires now rested in the hands of a human doctor and an alien princess that nobody else had wanted. The Kethmori ships approached Harmony Station slowly, their dark metal hulls reflecting the light from nearby stars. Marcus stood next to Zareth in the observation deck, watching through the large windows as the alien vessels came closer. "They look scary," Zareth said quietly, "but maybe that is just their style." Marcus nodded. "Sometimes things that look dangerous are just different." Emperor Kethfer and the other diplomatic representatives gathered in the main communication center. Everyone was nervous. For months, the Kethmori had been seen as a threat that needed to be stopped. They were coming directly to the diplomatic station. "Open communication channels," the Emperor ordered. The main screen activated, but instead of a clear image, static and electronic noise filled the room. Strange patterns of light flashed across the screen, and a sound like electronic music mixed with static came through the speakers. "The signal is not working properly," the communication officer said with frustration. "Their transmission is interfering with our standard translation systems. It is like they speak in electrical signals instead of words," another officer added. Marcus stepped forward. "Your Majesty, may I try something?" Emperor Kethfer looked at him doubtfully but nodded. "You have 5 minutes." Marcus turned to Zareth. "Can your mobility device receive and send different types of electronic signals?" "Yes," Zareth said, with understanding dawning in her eyes. "The human modifications you made include broader frequency detection. It might be able to translate their communication method." Working quickly, Zareth connected her mobility device to the station's communication system. Marcus helped adjust the settings, combining Valtheri technology with human adaptive principles. "Try now," Marcus said. The strange electronic noise continued, but now Zareth's device began translating it into patterns of light and sound that made more sense. "It is working," Zareth said excitedly. "I can see patterns in their signals." On the screen, the static cleared slightly, and the outline of an alien figure became visible. The Kethmori looked completely different from any species Marcus had seen before. They seemed to be made of crystalline structures that glowed with internal light. "Greetings," came a translated voice through Zareth's device. "We have been trying to communicate with Velthari Empire for many cycles. Why do you not respond?" To our peaceful signals, the entire assembly fell silent. Emperor Kethver stepped forward, looking shocked. "Peaceful signals?" the Emperor asked. "You have been attacking our border stations?" "Attacking?" The Kethmori representative sounded confused. "We have been sending traditional greeting pulses. In our culture, strong electromagnetic signals show respect and importance. We thought you were ignoring us deliberately." Marcus and Zareth looked at each other with excitement. Marcus had been right. The whole conflict was based on a misunderstanding. "Your greeting signals damaged our equipment," Emperor Kethver explained. "We thought they were attacks. And your military responses to our signals made us think you were rejecting our friendship," the Kethmori replied. "We increased our signal strength to show more respect, not knowing it was causing damage." For the next hour, Marcus and Zareth worked together to facilitate communication between the Velthari and Kethmori. Zareth's strategic mind helped identify the key misunderstandings, while Marcus's human perspective found ways to bridge the cultural differences. "The Kethmori want to form an alliance," Zareth translated after a long conversation. "They had been expanding toward Velthari space because they were looking for friends, not conquest." "This changes everything," Emperor Kethver said with wonder. "If the Kethmori are not enemies, then we do not need the military marriage alliance." But just as everyone was beginning to feel hopeful, new alarms started ringing throughout the station. "Security alert," came an announcement. "Unauthorized access detected in the power grid. Someone is attempting to sabotage the station's main systems. The communication systems are failing," the communication officer shouted as the screens began going dark. Marcus realized what was happening. Someone doesn't want this peace agreement to succeed. "The arms dealer," Zareth said, with sudden understanding. "If there is peace, they cannot sell weapons to either side." Emperor Kethver turned to his security chief. "Find the saboteurs immediately." "Your Majesty," Marcus said urgently. "Zareth and I can help. We know the station's systems better than anyone." "Go," the Emperor ordered. "Stop them." Marcus and Zarath raced through the station corridors. Zaratha's mobility device allowed her to move quickly and smoothly, while Marcus used his knowledge of the station's layout to guide them toward the power grid. "The main power control is in Section C," Marcus said as they ran. "If someone is sabotaging the systems, that's where they'll be." They reached the power control room to find 3 figures in dark clothing working to destroy the main computer systems. When the saboteurs saw Marcus and Zareth, they pulled out energy weapons. "Stay back," one saboteur shouted. "This peace agreement cannot happen. Too much money depends on this war continuing." Marcus ducked behind a control panel as energy blasts flew over his head. "Zareth, can you access the backup systems from there?" "Yes," she called back, "but I need time to work." "Keep them busy," Marcus said. Using his knowledge of the room's layout, Marcus began moving between the control panels, drawing the saboteurs' attention away from Zareth. Meanwhile, she worked quickly to reroute power and restore the communication systems. "The communication is back online," Zareth announced. "But the saboteurs are still trying to destroy the main computers." Marcus saw that one saboteur was getting close to Zareth's position. Without thinking, he jumped out and tackled the attacker, knocking the weapon from their hands. "Now, Zareth," Marcus shouted. Zareth activated an emergency security protocol that she had designed for Velthari systems. Energy barriers appeared around the remaining saboteurs, trapping them until security forces could arrive. When the station security finally reached the power control room, they found Marcus and Zareth had successfully stopped the sabotage attempt. Back in the diplomatic assembly, Emperor Kethver and the Kethmori representative were able to continue their conversation thanks to the restored communication systems. "We propose a 3-way alliance," the Kethmori said through the translation system. "Velthari, strategic planning, Kethmori energy technology, and human adaptive solutions." Together we can create something better than any of our empires alone. Emperor Kethfer looked at Marcus and Zareth with newfound respect. You have both proven yourselves today, not through military strength, but through intelligence, courage, and cooperation. Your Majesty, Marcus said, I would like to formally repeat my request to court your daughter. Not for political alliance, but because I genuinely care about her and believe we can build something amazing together. Emperor Kethver smiled for the first time since Marcus had met him. Dr. Chen, I think you've already proven that human and Velthari cooperation can accomplish incredible things. The Emperor turned to Zarath. My daughter, what do you think of this human's proposal? Zarath looked at Marcus with warm purple eyes. I think, Father, that I have found someone who sees strength where others see weakness, and possibility where others see problems. Then, Emperor Kethver announced to the entire assembly, let us discuss the terms of a most unusual but promising alliance. As the three species began planning their new partnership, Marcus realized that everything had changed. It was no longer just a simple research doctor, and Zareth was no longer an unwanted princess. They were partners who had helped prevent a war and create a new future for three civilizations. 3 weeks after the successful peace negotiations, Marcus stood in the most beautiful room he had ever seen. The Velthari marriage ceremony hall was built from crystal that caught and reflected light in amazing patterns. Representatives from dozens of worlds had come to witness something that had never happened before, a marriage between a human and a Velthari princess. Marcus wore traditional Velthari ceremonial clothes that had been specially made for him. The blue and silver fabric felt strange, but comfortable. Next to him stood Zarath, looking absolutely stunning in a flowing gown that seemed to glow with its own light. Are you nervous? Zarath whispered to Marcus as they waited for the ceremony to begin. A little, Marcus admitted, but mostly I'm just happy. Emperor Kethver stood before them, wearing his most formal royal robes. Behind him, representatives from the Velthari Empire, Earth, and the Kethmori Collective watched with interest. Today, Emperor Kethver announced in a voice that carried throughout the hall, we witness not just a marriage, but the beginning of a new era of cooperation between our peoples. The ceremony was beautiful, combining traditions from both human and Velthari cultures. When Marcus and Zareth exchanged vows, they spoke in both English and Velthari, promising to support each other and work together for the good of all their peoples. I promise to see you for who you truly are, Marcus said, looking into Zareth's purple eyes, and to help you achieve everything you dream of. I promise to share my strength with you, Zareth replied, and to build a future where everyone can contribute their gifts. When the ceremony ended, the celebration lasted for hours. Marcus was amazed to see how many people had come to support them. Even some of the alien suitors who had previously rejected Zareth came to apologize and congratulate them. We were fools, one former suitor told Marcus, could not see past the surface to the brilliant mind underneath. Everyone makes mistakes, Marcus replied kindly. The important thing is learning from them. But the real changes came in the months that followed. 6 months after their wedding, Marcus and Zareth stood in the main laboratory of the Adaptive Technology Institute on the Velthari homeworld. The building was enormous, filled with scientists and engineers from all three allied species working together on projects that would help people with different abilities. The new mobility devices are working perfectly. Dr. Sarah Kim, a human engineer, reported to Marcus and Zarath. The combination of Velthari materials, human design principles, and Kethmori energy systems is creating devices that are more efficient and comfortable than anything we've made before. Marcus nodded with satisfaction. The Institute had become everything he and Zarath had dreamed of. They were not just helping individuals, they were changing how entire civilizations thought about ability and disability. What about the communication project? Zarath asked. Amazing progress, replied Zethkol, a Kethmori scientist whose crystalline form glowed with excitement. We have created translation devices that work for all three species. No more misunderstandings like the one that almost caused a war. Marcus walked over to a window that looked out over the Velthari capital city. The streets below showed incredible changes. People who had once been hidden away because of their differences were now moving freely, using new technologies that helped them participate fully in society. "Look at that!" Marcus said, pointing to a group of young Velthari students. Used mobility devices like Xerath's. Others had different adaptive technologies. But all of them were laughing and learning together. 6 months ago, those children would have been kept at home, Xerath said with emotion in her voice. Now they are attending the best schools and dreaming of becoming scientists and artists. The changes went beyond just technology. The three-way alliance between the Velthari, humans, and Kethmori had created a new model for interstellar cooperation. Other species were asking to join the alliance, attracted by the principles of inclusion and mutual support. That evening, Marcus and Xerath sat together in their private garden. Watching the 2 moons of the Velthari homeworld rise in the sky, Xerath's mobility device was parked nearby, but she was resting comfortably on a specially designed bench that Marcus had created for her. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't stumbled into your room that night?" Xerath asked. Marcus took her hand. "I try not to think about it. It makes me too sad to imagine. I would have been forced to marry someone." "Who didn't want me?" Xerath said. "And none of these changes would have happened. Millions of people would still be hiding their differences instead of celebrating them. And I would still be just a lonely research doctor, working late every night with no one to share my discoveries with," Marcus added. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the city below. In the distance, they could hear the music from a festival celebrating the first anniversary of the peace agreement. Marcus Xerath said softly, "Do you remember what you told me the first night we met? You said everyone deserves help. I remember, I think. That simple idea changed everything. Not just for us, but for our entire galaxy." Marcus thought about this. When he had first found Xerath collapsed in his room, he had no idea that helping one person would lead to helping millions. But maybe that was how the best changes happened. One person caring about another, one problem solved at a time. "Majesty?" came a voice from the garden entrance. It was Marcus's assistant, carrying a communication device. "Forgive the interruption, but there's an urgent message from the Galactic Council." Marcus and Xerath exchanged glances. The Galactic Council was the governing body for the entire galaxy, made up of the oldest and most powerful civilizations. "What do they want?" Xerath asked. "They want to invite the Tri-Species Alliance to present your inclusion and adaptive technology principles to the entire galaxy," the assistant said with excitement. "They think your model could help solve conflicts and social problems across hundreds of worlds." Marcus felt amazed. "They want us to help the entire galaxy." "It makes sense," Xerath said with a smile. "After all, we've proven that seeing differences as strengths instead of weaknesses makes everyone more powerful." As they prepared to answer the Galactic Council's invitation, Marcus realized that their story was far from over. They had started by helping each other, then their species, and now they had the chance to help the entire galaxy learn better ways of cooperation and inclusion. "Ready for the next adventure?" Marcus asked Xerath. "With you?" she replied, squeezing his hand. "I'm ready for anything." Looking up at the stars, they could see ships from dozens of different species traveling peacefully through space. All part of the growing alliance that had started with one human doctor who saw a person in need and chose to help. Sometimes the most important changes begin with the smallest acts of kindness,